Today we're going to be reacting to the Suez Crisis, part 2 of 2. The next series, I was thinking about reacting to the Crusades because it's a fantastic series. I don't think I've watched every single episode, but it is fantastic as far as I can tell. But maybe y'all don't want me reacting to a video that I've already seen, but it's just so fantastic. Seriously, and it's not like I've watched every single episode. But anyways, just let me know in the comments. But anyways, Suez Crisis, part 2 of 2. Also, some good news. The Adobe Premiere Pro, I can use it. I just bypassed it. It was really easy. All I did was press the X button on the thing that told me my subscription ran out. Then it let me use it, so that's cool.
In July 1956, Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser announced the nationalization of the Suez Canal Company.
Also, by the way, in the last episode, I made a lot of connections to World War II. And I'm not trying to say that Nasser is like Hitler or anything. It's not really what I meant. Like, I forgot everything what I said, but I'm not trying to say that.
Egyptians would take charge of this vital strategic waterway connecting Europe to Asia with immediate effect. Britain and France relied on the canal route for their vital supplies of Middle East oil, which fueled their economies. In their eyes, Nasser was a threat, a dictator intent on uniting the Arab world against them.
Wait, really? I don't think it said in the last episode that Nasser was actually trying to do that.
Destroying their influence in the Middle East and North Africa, and using control of the canal as a weapon against them. Secretly, Britain and France agreed to force regime change on Egypt. A joint military intervention to depose Nasser and reassert their standing as global powers.
I don't think it's gonna work. Just wild guess. Suez Crisis Part 2. The Survey Protocol. Or the Sea Ray Protocol? I don't know. October 1956, one of the craziest months in history. Oh, really? Well, you have not been in 2020 yet, so I sincerely doubt that. Shimon Peres, Director General, Israeli Ministry of Defense.
But it was not.
Man, at least in the United States, August of 2020 is probably the craziest year, like, ever.
Britain or France that struck
the craziest month, I mean.
First against Nasser. It was Israel.
Oh my gosh, fix that stupid border. Why does Jordan control Palestine?
On the 29th of October, Israeli paratroopers landed in the Egyptian Sinai, seizing the strategic Mitla Pass and paving the way for an invasion by ground forces. At the UN, Israel insisted it was acting in self-defense against raids by Palestinian fighters known as Fedayeen, operating from bases in Gaza and Sinai.
Determined to wipe out the bases in the Sinai wilderness from which murder and death and destruction.
It seems like the West would support them.
But there were.
It seems like the rest of the West and the US and stuff would support Britain and France, right? That's very important to their alliance.
No Fedayeen bases in Sinai.
The Suez Canal is very important
Britain
for
and
them.
France, claiming to be acting on behalf of the international community, issued an ultimatum to both sides. Stop fighting within 12 hours and withdraw all forces 10 miles from the Suez Canal, or they would intervene to enforce compliance.
Wow. Well, look at the Egyptian flag. So
Egypt was effectively being told to abandon the Sinai and the canal. Israel accepted the terms, Nasser refused.
Oh.
So on the 31st of October, British and French aircraft, taking off from carriers in the Mediterranean and bases in Cyprus and Malta, began bombing Egyptian airfields, air defenses, and infrastructure.
Dang. How did they lose in real life? How did Britain and France lose? I really don't understand. Oh, there's those jets. Nasser's
But not all
rocket.
was as it seemed. Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion had been considering an attack on Egypt for many months. He was encouraged by Moshe Dayan, the hawkish commander of Israel's armed forces. Nasser, like all leaders of Arab states, did not view the new Jewish state as legitimate. Now receiving modern weapons from Czechoslovakia, he was seen as a potential threat to Israel's survival. They were also determined to end Egypt's blockade of the Straits of Tiran, which prevented Israeli access to the Red Sea and limited opportunities for trade. France wanted to ally with the Israelis to get rid of Nasser, but British Prime Minister Sir Anthony Eden was anxious about being seen as the aggressor. So the French came up with an idea.
Oh gosh.
At Sèvres, near Paris, representatives of Britain, France, and Israel met in secret to plan a war.
Oh.
Israel would invade Egypt, allowing Britain and France, posing as peacemakers, to issue an ultimatum they knew only Israel would accept. Then, claiming to be acting to safeguard the canal, they would invade Egypt and overthrow Nasser, though they had no real plan for what to do once he was gone.
What? That does not seem like a good idea. What? Like, you have a long time to prepare.
It would take years for the full details of this conspiracy to emerge.
Years? Wow.
On the 5th of November, after a week of bombing, and with Israeli troops winning the battle in Sinai, British and French paratroopers were dropped onto targets around Port Said and Port Fuad at the mouth of the Suez Canal. Once on the ground, they quickly seized Egyptian airfields and key infrastructure. Next morning, under cover of airstrikes and naval bombardment, British and French landings began. Fierce street fighting raged throughout the day.
Oh gosh.
But the Egyptians were massively outgunned, and it proved a one-sided contest. Around 600 Egyptian soldiers and police were killed.
Oh my
British
goodness.
and French deaths totaled just 26.
Wow. How did they lose in real life? I'm so confused. It seems like the British and French are doing well.
Egyptian civilians suffered most. Up to 1,000 lost their lives, with many more left homeless by air raids and shelling.
Oh my gosh, oh no.
By the end of the day, the British and French were in control.
So they won? They won the war?
But they couldn't prevent the Egyptians sabotaging the Suez Canal itself.
Oh, great.
They sank ships in its narrow channel,
Rude.
blocking the canal and putting it out of action for several months.
Rude. That's just rude. Plain rude. The Arabs will not stand alone. Oh gosh, no, not the Soviets. The Nikita Khrushchev. Yeah. Yeah. Nikita Khrushchev, Soviet premier.
It wasn't hard to see that the British, French, and Israelis were working together. And at the United Nations, world opinion quickly turned against them.
Oh, God.
For once, the US and Soviet Union were united in condemnation. A typically animated Soviet premier, Nikita Khrushchev, even threatened to fire rockets at Paris and London.
Jeez.
President Eisenhower thought the invasion had no moral or legal justification, and he was furious with his British ally for going behind his back.
The British and French governments delivered a 12-hour ultimatum to Israel and Egypt, now followed up by armed attacks against Egypt. The United States was not consulted in any way about any phase of these actions, nor were we informed of them in advance. As it is the manifest right of any of these nations to take such decisions and actions, it is likewise our right, if our judgment so dictates, for we do not accept the use of force as a wise or a proper instrument for the settlement of international disputes.
Yeah.
Eisenhower wanted international attention focused on Hungary.
Wait, what? Hungary? What?
Soviet troops were, at that moment, brutally crushing a popular uprising.
Oh.
Instead, Britain and France's reckless intervention was likely to push Arab states closer to the Soviet Union.
Oh no, you donkey!
In the UN Security Council, Britain and France used their veto to block resolutions that criticized Israel's attack on Egypt, or their own intervention.
Dang. Really?
But with both world superpowers condemning their attack, they now faced a vote in the General Assembly and the threat of UN sanctions.
Oh gosh.
Britain's economy had been fragile before the crisis began. Now, market fears caused the British currency to crash, threatening economic disaster. Only a massive loan from the International Monetary Fund could save Britain.
No.
But Eisenhower blocked any IMF aid until Britain
God.
agreed to a UN-backed ceasefire in Egypt. Eden, facing growing opposition abroad, at home, and from within his own government, had few options. Just 2 days after British troops landed in Egypt, they announced a ceasefire. The French, abandoned by their ally, had no choice but to follow suit. Within days, the UN's first major peacekeeping operation got underway, as Danish UN troops arrived in Egypt to take over from the British and French.
So is this like Egypt and like the entire UN against Britain and France? Wow.
As they packed up and re-embarked on their landing ships to return home, it was officially job well done. But in truth, Suez had been a humiliating fiasco.
Yeah.
The political leadership had been reckless, the military objectives confused,
And they accomplished
and
nothing.
as soon as international pressure had mounted up, the British had had no option but to abort the entire mission. That winter, under intense American pressure, Israeli forces also withdrew from Sinai.
An act of disastrous folly, whose tragic consequences we shall regret for years. Hugh Gaitskell, leader of the British Labour Party.
The Suez Crisis forced Britain and France to accept that they were now second-rank powers.
Oh no.
No longer could they act as they wished on the world stage, without first considering the view of the United States. The lesson taken by the British was never again to jeopardize their so-called special relationship with America. For France, the lesson was that Britain and America were unreliable allies, and their interests were better served by closer ties within Europe. Israel achieved some objectives, including the opening of the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping. But with Nasser still in power, future conflict with Egypt and its other Arab neighbors was almost certain.
Oh, goodness. Wow. So, that had to do with the 6-Day War. That's interesting.
The Sinai War proved to be a precursor to the far more decisive Six-Day War, fought a decade later.
Wow.
British Prime Minister Sir Anthony Eden's career and health were ruined. He resigned, but not before lying to Parliament about his knowledge of the secret deal with Israel.
What?
I wish my successor all good fortune. Godspeed to you all. Goodbye. Thank you very much.
President Nasser, feted as the hero of the Arab world for having stood up to
Oh, look at that mustache. Wow, look at that mustache.
the Napoleon imperialists, had in reality been saved by US and UN intervention. But his modernizing reforms, championing of the Arab cause, and opposition to foreign intervention mean his memory is still revered by Arabs
Wow, he died at 52. That sucks.
across the Middle East.
This music is so funky. Let's listen to it.
The impact of the Suez Crisis on America was perhaps the most far-reaching.
Oh,
The collapse of British and French prestige amongst Arab nations meant the US would now take the lead in countering Soviet expansion in the Middle East and securing the West's oil supplies. The Suez Crisis would accelerate US involvement in this volatile region. The consequences would stretch well into the 21st century.
really? Oh, no.
Clarifying debate over a possible war in Iraq.
Whoa,
has been
look at
a
that
head
jet.
sensitive agency to their mission.
Well, there we have it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. That was a very interesting series, and I hope y'all enjoyed it as much as I did. Yeah, wow. Nasser's a very interesting fellow. It was, he was aggressive and assertive, what he wanted and stuff, and he ended up, getting it, which is interesting. Thanks to foreign support. Wow. It solidified Britain as someone that isn't that strong anymore. They've been embarrassed in front of the entire world. Before, in the 19th century and the 20th, sort of, they could just do whatever they wanted, pretty much. They could go around and, bully the Ottoman Empire, go ahead and colonize some more land in Africa, bully the Ottoman Empire again. But now, it's like they can't really, they're just so, constrained in what they can do. Same with all the other nations.
Join them.
Except for pretty much the US and the USSR, who basically replaced Britain and France as the world powers. Hello everyone, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it and subscribe to my channel. And turn on the notification bell thingy. And if you didn't, then make sure to leave a thumbs down. Oh yeah, that would be greatly appreciated. And while you're at it, go ahead and watch my other videos. They're probably just as good, and if not better than this one right now. Except for my oldest videos, don't watch those. And, subscribe to these people down here, my fellow sergeants. they're other YouTubers that I either know or I have in high regards. Yeah, even my cat agrees. So, thank you for watching, and have a great day.